Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for being here, and I would say it's a privilege to be here amongst this august audience that we have and to be sharing our thoughts on this topic. While I think the slides come up, when I looked at the topic of digitization and energy transition, I started thinking about the various ways in which this is becoming a reality. One key theme, of course, is how we are looking at organizations using digital to decarbonize their core operations, right? And hence, and we'll talk more about it when we go through the presentation. But I also was thinking about how it is reverberating through the entire ecosystem, where the energy consumption throughout the entire ecosystem is reducing because now other organizations in the entire value chain is also decarbonizing. So what we will focus on today essentially is our broad point of view in terms of how digital has a role to play in decarbonization and driving net zero. And we'll share with you some of our insights from the research that we have recently concluded in that particular domain. Next slide, please. Now, I would say if I was looking at any other sector as compared to what is happening in energy sector, it will look like a walk in the park right now, right? Now, energy sector is at the intersection of so many disruptions which are happening at the same time. Now, we are able to see disruptions from a geopolitical perspective. We are also looking at a strong push towards net zero and being more responsible producers of energy. We are also looking at renewables and new market forces at play, which are redesigning the entire construct of the energy sector, right? And there are innovations happening pretty much every day. Add to that the layer of digital and digitization. As we are seeing innovations happening pretty much on a weekly basis, we talk about AI and Gen AI, and every day you have a new model being released. We used to think that the technology lifespan is measured in terms of weeks and months, but here it is now being reduced to days when you see what is happening, for example, with the innovations being done in China and elsewhere. So if I see myself as an energy professional, I would say there are multiple forces at play, and as energy players, we need to balance those forces and chart our way forward. Now, what are the four broad themes that we see which are playing out as we go through this entire sector, right? The first theme is on the core digital, right? And how that is shifting out the operating model and business model of various businesses. When we are talking to, for example, many of the renewable companies or energy storage companies today, we see that their operating models and business models are vastly different than just, for example, selling electrons. They have been able to integrate themselves much tightly in the value chain of their customers. And they are, for example, working with them on energy efficiency, which sounds fairly counterproductive to us. But actually, it interlocks them and as they are creating value together. The second pillar is around digital fabric in the entire organization. We used to think of digital as an enabling layer. So here is a business, and then you have digital coming underneath that. But now, what the term that I hear is a digital fabric. Digital interventions reverberate through the entire organization. It's part and parcel of the entire organization itself. So if you go and talk to a well engineer, he will talk to you about how he's using technology. If you go and talk to a forex trader, he will tell you how he's using digital technology. If you go and talk to HR professionals in an oil and gas company, they will tell you how they are using technology. So digital is becoming incubated in every part and parcel of how organizations operate. And that's why the term that we have heard is digital fabric. It's stitching together threads all across. The third one is around the value that digital is creating. Digital is not a vanity story just because somebody else is doing it. There are quantified outcomes that we have seen in enabling processes through digital. And these numbers are fairly large. And I'll tell you why those numbers are large. When you talk about oil and gas players or energy players, they are fairly large asset bases. Now, over there, even if you are able to move the needle by 50 basis point or 100 basis point, that straight away translates to millions of dollars of savings, right? And hence, when we talk about digitization and emerging technology, there's a concrete value sitting on the table for us to explore. The last pillar is the one that I started out the conversation with, which is around the entire platform-led story. Now, what it means is that as oil and gas players or energy players, we are not only focusing on digitizing our own organization. We are looking at what are the platforms that can span across the entire value chain. So, for example, if my energy is being consumed by a chemical manufacturing company, and from there it is transported out and so on and so forth. Now, what are the platforms that I can have which will enable all of us to take decisions which are more optimal at an overall chain level rather than just taking decisions at an organization level? And hence, when you look at the ask falls heavily on digital and digitization. So, for example, from an energy transition perspective, we believe that if you invest in digital, your energy transition plans can be accelerated anywhere between 1.5 times to 3 to 4 times, whatever it used to take earlier. For example, you will use digital and digitization in accessing energy markets more efficiently. You might be able to look at the optimization opportunity in your core operations and quickly pick it up and take action on it. So the entire acceleration is something that is possible. Oil and gas, of course, is in the spotlight with a large chunk of the carbon footprint attributed to oil and gas. And hence, whenever regulators or society is looking at energy, fairly or unfairly, typically the first set of questions come to the oil and gas players to say, what are you doing to make it better for the society around? And hence, when we also see the discussion around digitization and net zero using digital, that goes to the board level. Now, currently, there are almost $3.5 trillion worth of assets which are being managed with a clear lens on sustainability and net zero. That's a massive amount of capital, frankly. And we see that only growing. Now, that capital is capital which is sustainably oriented capital, or is a capital which is being driven by activism, and hence that capital is not just looking at the classic metrics of outcome, but they are also nudging the boards to take a different kind of decision in their core operations. Let's move forward. Now, it's a very busy slide, but let me just break it down for you. When we talk about digital enablers, right, there are a number of enablers that you see on the first column here. So you can use digital to digitize the entire enterprise. You can digitize core functions. You can look at IT and OT investments being leveraged. There are a number of opportunities out there, and frankly, the experimentation and identification of value from there has become even easier as the various days progress. The second column tells you about where the impact is being driven on, because frankly, just by leveraging in this existing IT and OT systems, it won't do too good unless you can showcase the business case. So the second column shows you where we are seeing the actual outcomes from digital and digitization. So this includes, for example, themes on business resilience. How can I make business more responsive to the change? Right? Earlier, we used to have digitization as a process enabler and process accelerator only. But the things are changing so quickly around you that you have to reorient your supply chain pretty much every 2 weeks in an oil and gas scenario because of geopolitical risk. The classical models won't cut ice with that. So what you need to do is you need to build, as they say, anti-fragility in your core operations. And that can only happen if you start leveraging digital heavily. Digital also allows you to unlock new capabilities, what you see on the right-hand side. Now, that could be in terms of intelligent marketing or customer experience. This could be in terms of risk management capabilities. It is also about your workforce. Think of all those people who are entering the workforce in your respective organizations today. Chances are they are not going to have the same career that you had, because many of those roles actually are going to disappear or are going to be heavily changed, right? So for example, if let's say I was a petrochemical engineer or a petroleum engineer and I was joining upstream company, I knew the path I will take over a number of years. But now, because we are using advanced analytics, GIS, imaging, modeling, all of those together, unless I know those and unless I have a path which is techno-functional, it will not be the path that I have been accustomed to, right? So hence, when we talk about the new capabilities, it allows, frankly, now digitization to be seeded across the entire organization. There is not one department called digital anymore. You could actually have hundreds of teams actually working on it in parallel and creating value and unlocking value, as we see, for the organization. Likewise, when we look at the overall view of the technologies which are out there, and I would like to spend a minute or two on this entire thing. This is something we called as the emerging technology radar, right? We hear about technologies all around us, from AI to Gen AI to quantum computing. What this radar shows you is how close are these technologies to adoption, right? So there are some technologies which are in the center. These are the technologies which are already fairly adapted to the use cases that are being worked upon. So for example, you will see virtual reality, people are already using it for training, for example. Digital twins, people are already using. But then if you go slightly beyond that, in Horizon 2 and Horizon 3, which is approximately 5 years from now or 10 years from now and 15 years from now, you see a number of technologies which are out there. We don't know yet how they will evolve and how will they eventually create value for us, but it's important for us, for all of us who are here in this room, to keep an eye out on all these and see how eventually they are shaping us and how they will disrupt our industry, right? So I can give a few examples here. So for example, quantum computing, right? People think quantum computing is something which is probably there only for cybersecurity and probably for banking and financial services. Well, I would say probably no. One of the most, I would say, intensive area for an oil and gas player is exploration. Now, in exploration, you get a huge quantum of data from potential fields that you are looking at. So far, that analysis is being done by experts. If even you ask computers to do that or AI to do it for you, in a linear fashion, it will still take a lot of time. What if you had quantum computers which could solve this in minutes and consequently significantly accelerate the exploration timelines, right? Now, I'm just picking one random technology out of that entire emerging tech radar, and we are looking at the outcomes here. But if you pick up any other technology as well, sometimes the technologies which are in the Horizon 2 and Horizon 3, they look too far to us till the time they look too near. You go back around 10 years, when people said things around AI or Gen AI, they seemed to be too far out. People said AGI is at least 50 to 100 years away. And now when we talk to people, they say AGI is possibly 2027 or 2029, right? So what happens is that we sometimes don't realize the amount of change that is happening around us, and we are still anchoring ourselves to the narrative which was there earlier. So from an energy sector standpoint, this radar shows you where all we see potential value coming through and how this will proceed. We recently conducted a survey of energy sector leaders across the world, and we asked them what are the themes that they see playing out specifically from digital and digitization angle. No prizes for guessing, but 94% of them believe that out of all the digital technologies which are out there, AI is going to be the primary one which will drive change for us. And they are heavily investing in that. And then, of course, 77% of them are quite confident. There is the number of them which are actually running POCs, experiments, and so on. So what I want to bring out here is that when you talk about, again, net zero path for the organizations, those paths would now typically be paved by AI. So AI is going to actually guide you as well as track the progress being made by organizations on each of those paths. And hence, from an investment standpoint, a large part of tech investment is going in that particular domain. Small font, but I had to fit a lot of content here. When we looked at the use case library, right, from an oil and gas perspective, what you see here is approximately 70 to 80 use cases which are relevant for the topic that we have in hand, which is around how do we drive improvements through digital. So what you see, for example, if I was to break down, let's say for an oil and gas player, their operations and say refinery operations, asset, planning, scheduling, network planning, and then forecourt, operations, marketing, sales, in each one of them, there are interventions which are possible, right? So when we break it down and see that there are almost 80 plus use cases here which are on this placemat, we realize how much of an impact digital can make in actually driving real outcome for you. And we are not saying that you need to do all of these 80. You can prioritize and pick up maybe a 4 or 5 out of them. But you can definitely experiment and see what are the areas which probably will create more value for you as compared to others. Let's move forward. While we are all talking about net zero targets and how operations are becoming much more efficient, we believe there is also a need to close loop this. Yes, board level guidance is one thing, management assertions is another, process documentation is another, but unless you figure out a way to actively track and manage it pretty much on a real-time basis, probably we will not see a sustained change. So hence, many of our clients are today working on integrated command and control centers where they are able to monitor and manage metrics which are important for them across the entire value chain. And these are the metrics which are directly coming in from the field directly to the boardroom. And it is not just the metrics, it's also AI which is analyzing these metrics and therefore predicting trends ahead of the curve. And hence you can take certain actions. Simple descriptive analytics people have been doing for a long time, but what ICC now are doing is they are building that layer of AI intelligence into the operations so that you can do scenario-based planning and take action. And this is pretty real, and that is already implemented in many of our clients. I initially spoke about the value that you have on the table. Some of the numbers and stats are there for you to see. So for example, 20 to 25% reduction in unplanned downtime, or we spoke about energy savings of 10 to 12%. When you talk about the base that you have today, 10% improvement on that base is substantial amount of value sitting on the table for you. Right? And likewise, for each of those 80 use cases that I showcased to you in the previous chart, there are metrics available. So, for example, I showcased to you how technology and digital is being used for effective scheduling, how it is being used for effective hedging, for example. And for each of those intervention and use case, there are numbers attached, right? And therefore, when you aggregate, these run into tens of millions or hundreds of millions of dollars worth of opportunity for you from a bottom line perspective, but more importantly, also from a triple bottom line perspective about your carbon footprint and more responsible and sustainable operations. I know there are many speakers in this esteemed panel, and we'll be keen to hear their thoughts as well. So I'll just conclude by saying, if I see the future, how do we start, right? What are the steps that we should follow? So first and foremost, I would say we should first focus on leveraging AI's transformative capabilities today. That's one tool that is available to us. And especially last 18 months have been absolutely exciting in that journey, both in terms of scale, accuracy, and applicability of use cases in the entire spectrum. So that I would say is the first starting point for us. The second one is to build a strong data backbone. AI systems cannot work if you feed them with data which is outdated or not really up to scratch. So what is the right data backbone that you want to build which can help you track your triple bottom line commitments and eventually analyze that will be absolutely essential for you to build this through. Third is that we don't believe that this can be done alone. We will have to look at this as an ecosystem and partnership play. So when you're looking at your commitments from a net zero perspective, please consider the entire ecosystem and see what are others doing. Otherwise, you might be optimizing lever A, somebody else is optimizing lever B, and then there's a clash that happens, and then you're trying to make things happen, and it will actually create more resistance. Fourth is that in all the oil and gas companies and many energy companies as well, there is substantial amount of technology debt. Now, technology debt essentially is all those systems which have been existing for quite some time, some of them 10 years, 15 years, 20 years old. They were not designed for the digital era. So there is very costly rewiring that needs to be done to use these systems, right? So I think now is a good time for us to see what part of that landscape still suits our objectives versus the part that needs to be replaced and updated. I would also highlight our focus on workplace as well as skilling the workforce, because any digital initiative in your organizations will be as strong as the team which is working on it. And with digital become pervasive, I think there is a merit in focusing on what kind of skills that you will need, what kind of workforce is going to create value for you, and eventually what kind of outcome that you want to drive with them. And that, in fact, is a typical challenge that I find. While we have excess of applications at the entry level, as soon as you start moving at expert level, you start feeling dearth of talent. So it's a dichotomy that you have today, but that is something that needs to be traversed for sure. And lastly, build resilience. If last few years have shown us something, it is that things don't stay the same. We had COVID, we had digital revolution, we had AI coming in, we had geopolitical situations all around us. So things are not staying the same. So your technology plans or your digital plans cannot be a 5-year cast in stone kind of plans, but you will have to look at more flexible outcomes and resilience so that you can tinker, you can change, you can update your approach towards digital and digitization as the scenarios around you change. And that resilience has to be built into your technology systems as well as into your core processes as well. So those were my key thoughts, and I'm happy to hear from my esteemed friends and colleagues on the dais. Thank you.